thank you for being here. My name is Larry Kraft. I represent the St. Louis Park in the Minnesota House. I'm a second-term legislator. On the night of September 1st, 2024, Stephen Bailey got behind the wheel of his car with a blood alcohol level of 0.325, more than 4 times the legal limit. He came here to Park Tavern, couldn't find a parking spot, and then drove at high speed through the outdoor patio, killing Park Tavern server Christina Folkerts and Methodist Hospital unit coordinator Gabe Harvey, and injuring 9 other people. His horrific decision has left a gaping hole in our community, in the lives of so many people, and especially in the lives of the families impacted. And what makes this so much harder is how random it was. If you live in St. Louis Park, then you have memories here at Park Tavern, and likely have spent time on that patio. Shockingly, Bailey had 5 prior Minnesota DWI convictions, and another one in Wisconsin. In Minnesota, they were in 1992, 1997, 98, 2013, and 2015. He had completed time on ignition interlock after his 2015 conviction. After this tragedy, I contacted Senator Latz, began looking into Minnesota DWI statutes from a public safety perspective, especially relative to repeat offenders. What I learned was that most people that commit a DWI offense don't commit a second. But if someone commits a second, the likelihood of committing more goes up quite a bit. From a National Highway Traffic Safety Administration study, 43% of those convicted of DWI in Minnesota were repeat offenders. In one of the more comprehensive studies on this topic in Maryland several years ago, compared to drivers with no violations, the rate of committing a new violation was 10.6 times greater for drivers with 2 prior convictions and 14.9 times greater for drivers with 3 or more priors. I also learned about ignition interlock. According to the CDC, ignition interlocks reduce repeat DWI offenses by about 70% while installed. Also learned that interlock is more effective than license suspension alone, as 50 to 75% of convicted drunk drivers continue to drive on a suspended license. Minnesota's current approach to interlock time requirements for repeat offenders is a linear approach. A second offense gets 1 or 2 years on interlock. Third offense gets 3 years. Fourth offense gets 4 years. But this doesn't match the data that I've shared for repeat offenders. So the proposed bipartisan legislation that we're launching today substantially increases the time repeat offenders are required to be on interlock, while also reducing barriers to them getting on it, a real focus at improving public safety. With that, I'm happy to introduce my partner in the Senate in this legislation, Senator Ron Latz.
Good afternoon. I'm Ron Latz. I'm the state senator here in St. Louis Park. I first want to note my deepest condolences to the families of the deceased and to those who suffered physical injury as a result of this horrific crash. It's a terrible human loss. And like Representative Kraft noted, those of us who've lived in St. Louis Park for a long time have memories from the Park Tavern. I used to live right across the street, and this is my regular stop for pizza when I was single coming home from work. The purpose of this proposal is really threefold. One is to safeguard the public on and near the roads. Another is to reduce drunk driving among the toughest class of offenders, the repeats. And the third is to reduce barriers to safer driving with interlock. The bill itself will lengthen the required time to use the interlock for all repeat offenders. It adds 1 year for a second-time offender. It goes from 3 to 6 years for a third-time offender. And it goes to 10 years for fourth or more offenses. This would catch cases like the one that brought us here today, in which his priors required 6 years of interlock, which he had met and got fully reinstated under Minnesota law. The second big thing this bill does is extend the look-back period for counting priors for purposes of requiring interlock and the length of interlock to use from 10 years up to 20-year look-back period. That also would have captured this case and includes a lifetime provision. So more repeat offenders will have interlock requirements and for longer periods of time once they install the interlock. The third piece that this bill does is to reduce that barrier to access interlock. Under current law, it's a $680 statutory reinstatement fee and surcharge to get driving privileges back, and that's required before the interlock can be installed. There are limited exceptions for persons who qualify as indigent, such as for public defender clients, or a longer list of public programs that are for the indigent. By reducing that barrier to accessing interlock, we hope to incentivize and allow more people who should be on interlock to in fact go ahead and start driving with interlock rather than ignoring it and being part of that 50 to 75% that drive without a valid license either way. I've been working a long time in this space. From my earliest professional years in the Attorney General's office, where I represented the state DARE program and I prosecuted drunk driver license revocation cases, to doing criminal prosecution and defense for the last 30 years. And my specific legislative work on the .08 law, I carried the ignition interlock pilot project, and I've learned a lot in that period of time. One thing I've learned is that alcoholism is a nasty disease. It ruins the lives of innocent people on the road and nearby, as we know here, as well as of the alcoholic, their family, and often their workplace. And while we can't cure the disease, we can take steps to mitigate the external damage. Criminal punishment, treatment, including highly effective treatment courts now, and driving restrictions. Hence our work on the laws like this one. Now, this is not going to be a magic bullet. We aren't able to put an angel on everyone's shoulder to make sure that they don't get behind the wheel of a car without an interlock after they have been drinking too much. But we can make it harder for them to get behind the wheel while drunk. We can make it easier for them to get behind the wheel with the interlock safety protections in place. That's what this proposal aims to do. I believe it will move our state strongly in that safe direction. I would now like to invite the owner of Park Tavern to say a few words, Phil Weber. Phil?
Good afternoon. This is still a real hard and raw nerve with a lot of us here that were so affected by this. I just want to say, and I can't speak for my whole industry, but I can, I think, safely say, nobody in the restaurant industry want these people on the road, period. They are the bane of our existence. They make everything about what we represent. It puts us in such a different light, showing that we're irresponsible or whatever else the public may think about us. But the truth is, our greatest fear is having somebody like Bailey on the road. It's just, it was a horrendous event. And what is being proposed now by Larry and Ron is just a step in the right direction. Like Ron said, nothing is going to cure this. It's just something has got to be done. The state should have never allowed a license to be placed in this person's hand again. Insurance company should have never insured him. This guy should have been absolutely out of any consideration for driving the car again. I mean, any given Friday, Saturday night, it's like a caravan of Ubers coming into my parking lot. And it's just, I love to see it. These young people, and it's mostly the younger ones, are in fear of anything happening when they get behind the wheel of a car after drinking. I come to work on a Friday or Saturday morning, and there's 40 to 50 cars in the parking lot. I love to see that. This is the way it's got to be. I mean, it's such a rare thing when somebody like Bailey happens, but if anything can be done to prevent it, it's up to everybody to really try the best we can to make sure it does not happen. Thank you.
So one of the things that I noticed very early on after this tragedy happened was the relationship between the folks at Methodist and Park Tavern. I got to meet many folks that were grieving right afterwards and have continued to have discussions with them. And so it really gives me honor to introduce Jen Mister, who's going to talk about their community.
Good. Thank you, Representative Kraft. So I'm Jennifer Meister. I'm the president at Methodist Hospital, and we truly are like family with Park Tavern and Phil and his team. We appreciate the work that has gone on into this bill in the hopes that others are spared from the tragedy and the grief that impacted our Methodist colleagues, Gabe and his family and loved ones, and Christina. This can't happen again, and this will help. Our hearts are broken with the loss of Gabe and Christina and the injuries suffered by our Methodist Hospital colleague teams and so many others. Park Tavern has been one of Methodist Hospital's strongest community partners. Many of you may not know this, but they've been providing meals to Methodist Hospital every week since the pandemic started, and that was 5 years ago, as many of you know, to this week. The only week they missed was the week after this incident. So, and Bill called and apologized for that, and we all understood that. So we've been in this together the whole time. They supported our team when we were bravely caring for patients during a time of great uncertainty during the pandemic, and they've continued to do that. They've actually served over 60 meals a week, nearly 13,000 meals since 2000. This tragedy further connects us and brings us together, remembering Gabe and Christina and supporting our injured colleagues. Thank you, Representative Kraft, Senator Latz, and all the other co-authors for your time and effort on this important legislation. Thank you.
I also want to acknowledge Mayor Nadia Mohammed and our Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. Both would have liked to be here but couldn't. They have quotes in the press release. Mothers Against Drunk Driving also just sent in a letter of support for the legislation to all the folks on the Transportation Committee, where this will be heard on Wednesday next week at 1 o'clock. And I really appreciate to see from our police department, Lieutenant Paul Barnes here from the St. Louis Park PD, and I know we have Brenna Knapp from AAA Minnesota also here. And with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions.
Was I reading the legislation correctly that it also changes the timeline about just getting your license revoked separate from interlock, or are the two interplaying with each other?
The focus of this is the interlock requirements, so it's not changing things specifically on that side.
Or doesn't it say you can't have a license if you're convicted of criminal vehicular homicide? Or
Can you repeat the question?
Well,
does it say in the legislation that if you're convicted of criminal vehicular homicide, which I believe David has been charged with, that you can never get a license again after that? Was I reading that correctly?
there's no change in the criminal vehicular homicide provisions in this bill. The revocation periods have been extended to go along with the interlock requirements. So if you're revoked and you qualify for interlock, basically any repeat offender that qualifies in this rubric, you won't be able to drive without the interlock, except in some very limited exceptions for people who don't own an automobile and can demonstrate that they haven't been driving.
So just to be clear, sorry, that when you're getting a license revoked, the way you get it back is when you agree to have the interlock. Is that why the timelines are aligned to the way that you just described?
That's right. To get reinstated after a qualifying incident, right now you've got to pay the $680 reinstatement fee. You've got to get the interlock installed in the motor vehicle. You've got to promise to drive only the motor vehicle that's equipped with the interlock. You've got to meet the other requirements from the Department of Public Safety to get reinstated. And you've got to pay insurance ahead of time as well. Once you've done all of that, then you can get reinstated with the interlock requirement. So you can drive for any purpose. It's not like a limited license where you can only drive for work or for school. You can drive for any purpose, but only the vehicle with the interlock.
Can you talk about the reliability of the interlock technology with the legislation based so heavily on, implementing interlock in a larger way than it is right now?
Yeah, the interlock has been shown from a data perspective to be highly effective at preventing drunk driving recidivism. I cited that data. And the technology has continued to get better. The way it is implemented is it's installed in a vehicle, and then there's a calibration that's done. In Minnesota, it's done every 60 days to ensure that it's staying effective. But the data has shown that interlock is very effective at addressing what we're trying to stop here.
Is there anything that can be done, anything you guys can do? I feel like a lot of these guys, whether it is a repeat DWI offender, they don't care what the law says. They don't care if they have a license or insurance or if they're that actual person who's doing or not having.
I think what you're saying is how do you stop someone that doesn't care, right? And obviously, as Senator Latt said, this is not a magic bullet. If someone is going to break the law and drive with their license is suspended, then this is not direct. We have laws to address that. What this is trying to do is shown what has been effective at reducing DWI offenses on multiple offenders and to improve that situation. Is it going to stop everyone? No, but it is going to improve the situation and save lives.
If I can just add, the single most effective way to stop DWIs is enforcement, which means more law enforcement officers out there so more people who are driving unsafely are caught. Hands down, that's the most likely way to stop it. But absent that, and every community makes their own decisions about their law enforcement officers, the size of their force, when they're working, what they're doing. What we can do here is try to get more people into the interlock program because that is a proven safety method.
Sorry to be misunderstood. Do you have an estimate for how many Minnesota license holders are on interlocks now, and how many would? And it's maybe harder to say how many are themselves. Do we have a ballpark for that?
I don't right now. It's in the thousands, low thousands, I think, but I can get back to you with the numbers.
What are you two expecting for a timeline? Are you expecting this to maybe go through this session, or maybe get talked about this year and then maybe next session? What are you kind of hoping for that?
Well, the first hearing in the House is on Wednesday in the Transportation Committee. I believe the Senate is on Friday. But my intention, I believe our intention is to get this done this session.
Okay, well, I mean, you have bipartisan sponsorship. Senator Latt seems to be alone with 1% alone. So do you have support with this sign up?
Yeah, there's several Republicans that have signed on to the bill in the House. I mean, we have a little bit larger number of folks that can sign on than in the Senate. And Representative Jeff Whitty has been a partner of mine from Lakeville, former law enforcement, and he'll be joining me to present the bill on Wednesday in transportation. So I said I anticipate strong support.
I just signed the bill and dropped it to get it in. So I'm anticipating we'll have plenty of bipartisan support in the Senate as well.
Can you speak to why the fee and surcharge is so high, and
I can, maybe you can have more history on the former, but on the latter, I've spoken to folks at DPS. It doesn't appear that there's going to be a budget impact on this. There may be some, puts and takes, but the fees are still expected to be collected, just maybe over a different time period, and then we may have more people on interlock. So I don't anticipate a budget issue from a general fund perspective. Historically, as to how it got $680, maybe it's something the senator wants to talk about.
It's in two parts. There's a $240 fee and a $440 reinstatement surcharge. Or I think I'm pretty close on those numbers. And there wasn't a surcharge originally. That the larger portion was added, frankly, as just a revenue enhancer. And drunk drivers were looked at as a valuable target to bring money into the general fund and to fund other activities. So how did it get there? It's got the legislation. It's in the statute. It's not set any other way. And once you've got money in the statute, it's hard to remove it because typically it does have fiscal impact. I tried a number of years ago to reduce it substantially. And it did have a fiscal impact then. We did have a bill, my legislation, to allow for installment payments if you qualified for indigency, to pay half up front and half in a year. That alone had a fiscal note in the millions of dollars, and we had to account for that in the public safety budget. So I'm encouraged to hear that if this is worked out properly, it might just spread income out but not affect our biennial budget. That would be very welcome because it's a real barrier for folks. The $680 is in statute, but there's another $30 or so just to get a new plastic as a part of the application fee. You've got to pay money to install the ignition interlock. You've got to pay a monthly fee to keep it in your car because it's going to be checked, calibrated. You have to go in periodically to have all the data downloaded. And there are maintenance issues that come up. You've got to pay your insurance up front as well, and then maintain the auto insurance before you can even get in to the interlock. It's an expensive proposition, and that's one reason why people aren't as willing to make that outlay, or they can't afford that outlay. We want to try to reduce that cost so it'll be easier for people to sign up and do the interlock.
So are you reducing the fees? I was hearing that if you're spreading them out, you're not cutting the fees down.
That's correct. I mean, the issue right now is you have to pay the fee before getting on interlock, and that has created a barrier, and some people then don't and just drive anyway. And so what we're saying is you still have to pay the fee, but you get on interlock as rapidly as possible. We want the emphasis to be on public safety.
Is it like a payment plan for the fee? I'm just imagining, right, that I can't afford to pay the fee, but I can get it. I can't afford it today. I also can't afford it 2 weeks from now or 3 months from now or whatever that looks like if I pay it in one lump sum.
Yeah, so there is some payment plan options right now that DVS has. And how they implement this, I think getting into the specifics of how they're going to implement it. But we want to make sure that there's not a block up front to folks getting on interlock.
Another reason we're here again, and just tell us how the new law was impacted with drug crime.
Yeah. Well, so a few things. I mentioned he had 5 priors just in Minnesota, and 1 earlier in his life in Wisconsin. So those first 3 were in 1992, 1997, and 1998. If this were in effect, by 1998, he would have been on for interlock for 10 years, right? And would have taken it to much later point in time. In 2015, he would have been in interlock again for 10 years. In 2013, he went 10 years. In 2015, he would have been on for 10 years. So he would have been on interlock and not able to get behind that vehicle when he killed those 2 members of our community. Now, on top of that, right, there would have been he would have had a different set of incentives in front of him, right? It would have been 10 years in 98, and maybe at that time he would have gotten the help that he needed to be able to get the treatment and help he needed to conquer the disease or to be able to handle his disease better. So I think, you can easily look at the numbers of the time, but it's also the focus of saying, look, if you drive drunk and you do it multiple times, you have a problem, right? We need to protect the public, and you need to get help. And hopefully that this will save lives and focus on both of those areas.
There's another advantage to the interlock, and that's to help people maintain their sobriety. That's why in recent years we created an interlock exception to the mandatory minimum sentence for repeat DWIs who are convicted. That if they get on the interlock and if the judge agrees, then they can get out from under the mandatory minimum sentences. They can also get out from under certain conditions of release from jail if they get into the interlock program very quickly. Because when you've got interlock, you've got to blow into the device at least once a day just to remain compliant with the program. So it is a daily check, and if you're driving every day, while you're driving, you got to blow into it to start the car, and you've got rolling retests. So as you're driving, you're also blowing into the interlock every 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes to make sure that no one gets the car started, has an open bottle, and starts drinking after they've gotten behind the wheel. So it really is an additional accountability mechanism to help people remain abstinent.
So really the hopeful thing is that this would have meant that 2013 and 2015 wouldn't have happened for this individual.
Can you imagine this taking any toll or adding some new levels of labor for local police departments during the maintenance of the interlocks monitoring?
The police departments aren't involved in the maintenance of the interlock devices. There are, I think, 6, maybe 7 certified providers in Minnesota that own, install, and maintain the interlocks. They're the ones who do the downloads of the data. They share that data with the Department of Public Safety. When there are violations, they follow up as well to notify the Department of Public Safety when that happens. The police departments get involved if they are pulling people over, if they notice that there's some traffic violation going on, or if they run a license plate and it indicates the registered owner has an interlock requirement. They can know that information. It's a crime to drive a vehicle without an interlock if you're required under the law to be driving only a vehicle with the interlock. So there's that regular traffic enforcement component, but beyond that, no.
This is, it would require repeat offenders to attend treatment programs. I guess who would enforce that? Is that TPS or?
Go ahead.
But actually, there were some instances in repeat offenders that didn't require treatment, so that's cleaned up. So all repeat offenders will require treatment. In terms of enforcement of that,
Like making sure somebody actually is going into the treatment.
Well, typically the treatment requirements are a condition of probation. In Hennepin County, for example, you get a first-time offense, you're going to go through an assessment to see if you have any more issues that need more attention, right? Second-time offenses, you're going to get a comprehensive alcohol assessment as well. There'll be recommendations. Typically, if you're convicted of the alcohol-related offense or anything arising out of it, a judge will make a condition of probation that you follow those recommendations. Probation oversees that. They verify whether or not someone has completed the treatment program, done whatever else they're supposed to do. If they don't do it, they submit a violation to the court. The court can revoke some or all of the probationary sentence that's there.
How does this work retroactively? Say someone were to offend the way they did here right before this becomes law. Would there be a way to get people who have 5, 6, 7 DUIs and had a recent offense? Would they have to re-offend to get on this program, or how would that work?
yeah, it is not a retroactive look. It's so it's not a retroactive.
So
As much as morally you could say we should do that. From a legal perspective, it's kind of hard to do that. So it's looking forward. All right, if there are no further questions, thank you all so much. And I especially want to thank the folks that were impacted in the community that came out to be part of this. Thank you.